Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is the third segment of a partitioned talk on decolonizing our minds. The full talk is linked here, as well as the first two segments. This segment is about 5 Eurocentric myths. We will lay out the myths and discuss 2 of them in detail. The next part will discuss the remaining 3. The first segment was about defining the colonization of minds, and basically this involves acquiring the belief that all useful knowledge today is the product of the Western civilization, and decolonization involves recognizing that this is not true and that all useful knowledge today is that which was revealed to our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam 14 centuries ago. How minds are colonized is through a Eurocentric history which is taught to us, and in this Eurocentric history 500 years of growth of knowledge under the Islamic civilization is suppressed by either pushing it back to Greek origins or pulling it forward to European copyists and plagiarists. This fabricated history suppresses the truth about the Dark Ages of Europe and the causes of the Renaissance of Europe, which was due to influx of knowledge from the Islamic civilization. So this summarizes what happens in the first 2 parts, and now we come to the 5 myths created by European conquest and colonization of the world.
So now I'm going to go through some of the central false claims of Eurocentric history which we have all learned. One of these is that the enlightenment of Europe occurred all by itself. The reason people just started to think rationally all of a sudden without any reason, and that Europeans have unique ability to reason, think, to do science, and they have unique capabilities of governance with democracy and justice and freedom and everything else that they praise highly. And they also say that, they conquered the globe and colonized it for our benefit. They have an advanced civilization and they wanted to bring the benefits of the civilization to the rest of the world. And then under European leadership there has been amazing progress, increase in knowledge and in standards of living, so that the dominance of the West has been extremely beneficial for the world. And everyone, all human beings have benefited enormously from the progress in science and technology created by the West. So these are 5 major claims, and we are just going to go briefly and explain why these are wrong. So the first myth, that the European Renaissance occurred spontaneously, we've already discussed. This is wrong, and in fact basically all of after the translation started in 1100 something, it took 1 or 2 centuries for this process to be completed, and during this period all of the intellectual progress was due to the translations of the books from the libraries of the Muslims. And so why do they deny this? Why do they? This is a very simple fact. Nobody can argue against it. It's very strongly documented. Well, if they accepted the idea that they got knowledge from the East, then this would make it difficult to justify what they did later, which was savage and barbaric killing of people all over the world and destruction of civilizations. They justify it by saying that we are the unique people who have knowledge and science, but if they say that we borrowed this knowledge, then they no longer have this justification. That's why they are forced to deny this idea. So it took them about 2 centuries to assimilate this knowledge, because the books that they were translating were in conflict with Catholic Church doctrine. So the Church tried very hard to suppress this knowledge. But it kept coming and they kept being fights. And if we all remember the story of Galileo, who was um, tried for heresy against the church, and similarly Copernicus and Descartes and many of the people who translated Islamic works, they were under trial for heresy, and they were persecuted because they were getting their knowledge from the wrong sources. So as a result, the Europeans learned to hide these sources to protect themselves from Catholic persecution. So basically, because of this enormous difficulty in acknowledging the Islamic contribution, they suppressed this knowledge in their official accounts. So what happened is that after the Dark Ages of Europe and the 500 years of Islamic Golden Age, enormous amounts of knowledge was developed by the Muslims, but the Europeans, when they got this knowledge from the Muslims, they denied the Islamic origins. So as a result, there is an economist, Schumpeter. He writes about the great gap in economic thinking. He says that the Greeks had some economic thoughts, and then for 500 years, all of mankind stopped thinking. So it's only when the Europeans got the Greek philosophy back from the Muslims, then economic thinking began again. The truth is that Adam Smith plagiarized heavily from the Persian school of thought, but this idea has been removed from history. So basically, what they did was that of all the 500 years of knowledge produced by the Islamic civilization, they put a lot of it back to the Greeks, and the rest of it they copied and they took it for themselves. So for example, Copernicus was just a translator. Descartes also borrowed heavily from Al-Ghazali, and Newton borrowed heavily from Ibn al-Haytham. But all of these names have been erased from history so as to not give credit to the Muslims. So the second myth is that Europeans are uniquely rational, scientific, civilized, creative, hardworking, honest, etc., etc., etc. All of the good qualities are those of the Europeans, and all of the bad qualities are, of course, of us Easterners. So just to understand how this works, Immanuel Kant is known as the greatest moral philosopher of the West, and he has written that every man, if he is rational, then he should be respected. But now, one thing that we don't understand is that Kant was a racist. He believed that only the white people are rational. All the other people are like animals. And what he has written is really disgusting. And in terms of, he describes how we should beat the African slaves to cause them a lot of pain, but not to kill them, because if we kill them, we will be destroying property. So he describes how you can construct a whip which has thorns at the end, which will cause a lot of pain, but which will not kill the person. So this is the greatest moral philosopher of the West, trying to explain how to whip African slave so as to cause him maximum amount of pain. So how was the myth of European intellectual superiority created? This is very important to our students in the East, because once they absorb this myth, they say, oh, we are from inferior civilization, we cannot think advanced thoughts like those of the white people, and so on. So they do not work hard, they do not realize that they can become world-class experts in any discipline on the basis of our own intellectual heritage of Islam and the Quran and the Ahadith, and our intellectual tradition of Al-Ghazali, Farabi, Ibn Sina, and all of these other intellectuals who are never mentioned by the West. So one of the key tools in creating this myth is called theft of history. And basically, theft of history means that the intellectual accomplishments of other civilizations were taken by the West and claimed for themselves without acknowledging where they came from. One of the key books to read in this context, it's a very small book by C.K. Raju, and the title is Science Western in Origin. And the picture shows how the origins of knowledge in the West are rooted in Islamic discoveries. And he goes through different authors like Ptolemy and Copernicus and Euclid and Pythagoras, and these are celebrated as heroes in the West, but some of them did not exist and the others did not launch a revolution. They were just copyists. And one of the most startling claims that he makes is that calculus itself, which was the basis for the Newton's discovery, was stolen from Indian mathematics without acknowledgement. And he describes the details of how this was done. Newton himself said that I have stood on the shoulders of the giants to achieve what I did. And so these giants, the great intellectual accomplishments of the past, were from the Islamic civilization, but this part is not known. So I've explained how the deadliest weapon is fabricated history, which we have all absorbed. The fact that Europeans stole not just wealth, not just billions and trillions of dollars worth of gold and silver and other resources, but they also stole knowledge and they claimed it for themselves. So because of this wrong history which is being taught all over the planet today, we believe this also, that all good knowledge, useful knowledge today was created by the West, but this is not true. And decolonization requires us to reject this myth. But there is a serious problem, because this is a problem of today. All right, suppose that we agree that Europeans stole knowledge. That happened centuries ago. Now what? Today we are free and open and we can create our own knowledge. So how come we can't compete today? So what does it matter if they stole it or if they developed it? So this is a very important question, but I will defer the answer to that. And I have provided some answers in the Ghazali project later. So one thing to understand is colonization was about the theft of wealth, but also not so well known theft of knowledge, and also very importantly theft of our indigenous institutional structures for production of knowledge. The madrasa system and the supporting system of waqf, which provided funding for this system of education, which ensured that every single child in the Islamic civilization, if he wanted an education, he could get it for free. This is very, very important to the growth of knowledge in our society. Today it is not possible. In the Islamic world all over, there are very, very talented children, but they don't have access to education because the Western system is that you have to have money if you want to have education. In the Islamic system, this was not necessary because it was understood as the collective responsibility of our own civilization to educate all the children, not just my child. But now the institutional structure which enabled this is no longer there, and so this is why waqf is so important, to create waqf to enable the education of children all over the Islamic world.
So some of the key lessons that we want to bring out from this lecture is that European history is a story of continuous warfare, conquests and colonizations. In line with their philosophy, the world is a jungle. Human beings are just descendants of animals, and life is all about survival of the fittest. European philosophy aims to justify this history of brutality and violence and genocide and massacres and mass murders and destructions of other civilizations by by developing a philosophy which suggests that this is the natural process of evolution. Europeans redefined knowledge to be that which helps us pursue power, pleasure, and profits in accordance with their history. And when you think about things in these terms, then the knowledge given to us by Islam is not very useful. It doesn't teach us how to plunder and conquer and loot and pillage. Instead, Islam gives us the knowledge to develop our hidden capabilities. Every human being is precious in the eyes of Allah, and he has the capability and potential to rise above the status of the angels in the eyes of Allah. And Islam teaches us how we can do this, how we can develop our hidden capabilities. And this knowledge remains today the most precious and valuable knowledge available to mankind.